drawn expecting the suspect to be armed. We called out for Anna, that was the homeowner's name. Anna never called back to us. We knew she must have been scared and didn't want to give away her position to the intruder. We checked the whole first floor, which was small and quick. There didn't appear to be a basement. A door shutting upstairs drew my partner and I's attention. I led the way upstairs. All the doors had been shut, so I couldn't really tell which door I had just heard. I told my partner to check that one. While I checked this one, I turned the doorknob and kicked the door open, immediately lifting my gun into the air. It was a dark, empty room. I heard breathing in this room, though it sounded like a woman's breathing. I looked at the closet door, which was slid slightly open, and I saw half a face, mostly someone's eye, peeking through the opening. Resting assured it was Anna, I lowered my gun and said, "Anna, it's okay, you can come out." She didn't, and the breathing quieted. Then my partner in the next room over called Jason. I found her. My feeling in that room suddenly went from at ease to ready to throw up. I raised my gun again and yelled, "Come out of the closet." They did not obey, so I called my partner into the room. He turned on the light and we opened the closet together to see this disheveled, drugged that woman holding one of Anna's kitchen knives. With 2 guns pointed at her, she dropped the knife and we brought her into the precincts. Thank God. My partner and I got a breaking and entering call late one Friday night. I'd never responded to a call like that before, but it sounded serious. A young woman was home alone and heard footsteps downstairs, but when she was on the 911 call, the call was cut before she could give her location in the house. We arrived to the home and entered through the front door, which was left unlocked, which later proved to be how the break-in occurred. Both of us shouted police with our guns. As a state trooper for 15 years, I've experienced my share of close calls and uncomfortable situations. This happened over a decade ago when I was still relatively new to the job. I was on night patrol on an interstate. About 2:30 a.m. I usually had my car parked near a bush to hide myself from view from oncoming speeding cars, but at this hour I didn't really try to hide too much. I was moving my car and pulled into a gas station that sat on the side of the interstate. It was closed not because it was late, but rather it was temporarily out of service. I noticed 2 cars parked in the lot next to each other. There was nothing immediately suspicious about this, but I kept my eye out just because strange things happened at this hour. I parked my car in a way that I could watch the interstate as well as these 2 parked cars. I realized that I didn't see anyone in either of those cars, though. Now this was quite suspicious. The station was closed and there were no workers here. I exited my car with my hands on my belts and approached the 2 cars. I tapped on the windows for the both of them. Nobody in either of them, as I suspected. I began to walk around a lot as the occasional car zipped on the interstate. I went up to the glass of a closed gas station and knocked on it. I turned around dumbfounded. Whose cars were these? Just as I imagined they could be in the woods somewhere, I heard someone running from around the building and asked for my help. He was some young 20-something-year-old man like me at the time. He said his car wouldn't start and needed help now. I told him right away that I was no mechanic and that he'd need to call a towing company, but he practically begged me to just check under the hood for a second. He ran to his driver's side and popped the hood. I looked under the hood with him, not really knowing what to look for because I wasn't much of a car guy at the time. I asked if his battery died. I looked at him. I took note that he was looking around very oddly. He replied, "I don't think so." I then looked at the car parked next to him. Whose car is that? I asked him. He said he didn't know. He simply parked there to see if there was a porta potty in the back or something. I was reading through this kids __. Something was up here. As I looked back at the guy from the 2 cars, I saw him looking back at something or someone. I turned and saw another guy approaching me with a knife in his hand and holstered my gun and aimed it at him. He dropped the knife and put his hands up. They both did. I immediately called for backup. While keeping the 2 at gunpoint, I cuffed the blue one who was holding the knife and placed him in the back of my car, and then grabbed the second pair from my glove box and cuffed the second guy. When backup arrived, I went to the back of the gas station where the first guy had originally approached me from. What I found there still holds up to be the most disturbing thing I'd ever seen in all of my years as a trooper. We were two fresh dead bodies wrapped in garbage bags cut up in two pieces each. To fit in the bags along with them was also a shovel sitting on the concrete by the woods. The two are planning on burying the body somewhere in the woods off the interstate, and it seemed they were in a hurry. These two were a couple of the dumbest people I had ever interacted with, being that out of anywhere in the state they chose to bury two bodies off an interstate behind a gas station, going to sleep at night knowing you almost had your throat slit by somebody on the job messes with you, and I didn't get much sleep for a while. My partner and I got a breaking and entering call late one Friday night. I'd never responded to a call like that before, but it sounded serious. A young woman was home alone and heard footsteps downstairs, but when she was on the 911 call, the call was cut before she could give her location in the house. We arrived to the home and entered through the front door, which was left unlocked, which later proved to be how the break-in occurred. Both of us shouted police with our guns. I'm a rookie cop currently working the night shift on just a normal patrol officer, conducting traffic stops and responding to basic 911 calls. 2 nights in a row last week I was called to the same house. Dispatch had called me to check out the house as someone had dialed 911 and hung up. The house was a couple miles from me in my patrol zone. I arrived to the house quickly and turned up the dirt driveway through the trees onto the property. The house was dark, no lights on, no cars. Nothing. I parked my squad car on the far right side of the property and went to the front door, taking note that all the windows were properly shut. I knocked on the door and no answer. The door was also locked. For my immediate guess, the place was abandoned for years by the looks of it. I called to dispatch that the place was abandoned and nobody was there. Then I left. The next night I was working the same shifts, and around a similar time I got a call from dispatch that there was the 911 call from the same house, only this time someone could be heard crying on the other end. Before the call ended, I was asked to check out the house again. This time I was a little further away, but still the drive wasn't too bad. We pulled out the dirt driveway again onto the property, and again no lights, no cars. I approached the front door again, and this time it was left cracked open. I knocked on the door while holding the doorknob to prevent the door from pushing open. No answer. Basement was a tone like a dial tone of a phone. I started walking down the stairs as quietly as possible. I got to the bottom and followed the noise of the dial tone to an old early 2000 style landline speakerphone. The phone was off the hook and it was playing the dial tone on speakerphone. I put the phone on the hook to silence the noise, and it was almost as if it were planned to happen like this. As soon as the phone hit the hook, I heard a muzzled laughing type noise in the far corner of the basement. I turned around and there was some guy standing opposite me in the basement with his hand over his mouth, and he appeared to be laughing, but it wasn't this genuine laugh. It was more like a sickly, mentally unstable laugh. The guy was holding something in his other hand. I couldn't see what it was at first. When he raised his hand up to his head, I realized he was holding a revolver. I aimed my gun at him and yelled to drop the weapon. He paused as he had his revolver to his head, apparently about to pull the trigger, so I shot him in the arm twice, causing him to drop the gun. He screamed in pain as I cuffed him and brought him upstairs. I requested a medical team at once. A second squad car pulled up, as did an ambulance a few minutes later. The scariest part about this for me was not that I had to shoot a man in the arm twice, that I was mere seconds away from seeing a man spray his brains out onto the wall. My partner and I got a breaking and entering call late one Friday night. I'd never responded to a call like that before, but it sounded serious. A young woman was home alone and heard footsteps downstairs, but when she was on the 911 call, the call was cut before she could give her location in the house. We arrived to the home and entered through the front door, which was left unlocked, which later proved to be how the break-in occurred. Both of us shouted police with our guns.